generation where I read science fiction books. I read them all. I was a big fan of Robert Heinlein. I decided I was going to be a rocket scientist, and I got an aeronautics and astronautics degree with a specialty in spaceship design. And while I was there, I stumbled across this school of management, system dynamics, the construction of computer models to predict the future.
Raoul Pal revisits his famous banana zone concept, proposing that three powerful catalysts could propel Bitcoin well beyond $122,000 by 2025. The first catalyst is a dramatic expansion in global liquidity. The combined money supply of the world's top 21 central banks has now reached an unprecedented $55.5 trillion, setting a new all-time high. Historically, such liquidity surges tend to elevate asset prices across the board. Pal draws a parallel to NVIDIA, whose valuation skyrocketed on the expectation of future growth rather than immediate earnings performance. Similarly, Bitcoin could benefit from this speculative optimism, as rising debt and fiscal deficits inject even more liquidity into the global economy. The second catalyst lies in the rapid rise of spot Bitcoin ETFs, which have already accumulated over $150 billion in assets, closing in on the $98 billion currently held by gold ETFs. Should Bitcoin surpass gold in ETF assets, it would mark a major psychological and structural shift, transforming Bitcoin from a speculative digital token into a recognized reserve-grade asset. Such a transition could open the doors for participation from heavyweight institutional players, including major corporations and sovereign wealth funds. The third and final catalyst involves retail capital. Despite Bitcoin's price more than doubling over the past year, participation among everyday investors remains relatively modest. Yet, Pal notes that evolving regulatory frameworks, such as permitting Bitcoin exposure within retirement portfolios like 401(k)s, could unleash trillions of dollars in new demand. This retail wave, when combined with institutional and liquidity forces, could complete the powerful trio of drivers igniting Bitcoin's next explosive phase, one that might define the coming financial era.
And I ended up getting a second degree in science and technology and society and the history of science.
Wow.
So that was formative because it was all about paradigm shifts, the structure of scientific revolutions, and how did people decide to embrace nuclear power or electricity or petroleum. And a lot of people think that technology just kind of is a modern thing, but of course, and they think that technology companies are a class of investments. And I'm always amused when finance people talk to me about the tech sector because it's kind of an ignorant statement. There's never been a successful growth company that wasn't a technology company once you understand technology for the past 100 years. John D. Rockefeller was a tech company. General Electric was a tech company. Kraft and Hershey's were tech companies. So studying technology for the past 100, 200, 300, 400 years and why people do it, that was interesting to me. I thought I was going to be a fighter pilot astronaut.
Right.
But so I learned to fly in the Air Force. And in my senior year, Reagan won the Cold War. They ramped down the military, cut it in half. And I had a macroeconomic event combined with just a random personal event that catapulted me into business. The macroeconomic event was the end of the Cold War, the drawdown of the United States military. And the United States had paid for my education, and I was like on the hook to serve. I thought I'd be in the military 10 years. And my final flight physical, my senior year at MIT, they diagnosed me with a benign heart murmur. And that disqualified me from flying jets. Now, by the way, the hilarious part of the story is they kicked me out of the aviation program. I was a little bit dejected. And then the next week they came and they said, you can join the Air Force Reserve and be a civilian. And I was going to get paid 3 times as much money as a civilian as I would have made in the Air Force. So I thought, well, you just gave me a free education and I get to not pay the money back. By the way, the week before they said, well, if you don't go in the military, that's AWOL, you go to jail. Okay, so I went from you're going to be in the military for a decade or you go to jail to Ronald Reagan is.
Michael Saylor draws attention to recent regulatory developments, including the U.S. taxation on Swiss gold, as compelling evidence of Bitcoin's structural superiority. In an interview with Bloomberg, he emphasized that Bitcoin exists entirely within the digital realm, free from the physical limitations that constrain gold, such as transportation costs, storage expenses, and trade restrictions. As Saylor succinctly puts it, there are no tariffs in cyberspace. This statement highlights Bitcoin's unique ability to transcend the logistical and regulatory barriers that hinder the movement and efficiency of traditional commodities like gold. With new tariffs and taxation policies beginning to disrupt the precious metals market, particularly gold, Saylor predicts that more corporations and investors will increasingly pivot toward Bitcoin as a superior, borderless vehicle for preserving wealth. From his viewpoint, every new regulatory or logistical challenge imposed on gold only reinforces the case for Bitcoin as its more efficient and resilient digital successor.
Giving you the gift of your freedom. And by the way, to make it easier, if you want to be in the military, you have to wait 2 years working a part-time job before we call you up, and then maybe we'll call you up. So I kind of got a kick out of the military, and then a doctor said, you can't fly, and I was kind of dejected, and I thought, well, this must be a sign from God. I should do something else. So I joined the Air Force Reserve, and I left MIT. I worked for about 2 years, and I was going to go get a PhD because I had a very simple list. Every red-blooded American male in the 80s had this list: rock star, astronaut, fighter pilot astronaut, Top Gun, right?
Obviously, yeah.
Professor.
Okay.
Perfectly fine. I said, I can't be fine. I have benign heart murmur. I have mitral valve prolapse. He goes, no, you don't. I said, but I'm sure I do. They kicked me out of the Air Force because I had it. He said, oh, that was a mistake. They used to make that mistake all the time. We have much better equipment now. So I left my fighter pilot astronaut track because of a mistake, and I ended up working. But I left the military track on March, my senior year. I missed all of the financial aid applications for fellowships. I couldn't afford. I had no money. I couldn't afford to go to a PhD program. So I worked for a year. I applied for all the fellowships. I got into MIT and Harvard, and I was going to go get my PhD and be a professor, and life was done. And just as I did that, I informed my boss, and my boss worked at the DuPont Corporation, and I had built a computer simulation to predict the return on the investment of about $1 billion of capital investment in titanium dioxide. And they needed that model to get the board to give them the money. So when I tendered my resignation, the guy saw his $1 billion of capital going away. And I'm sure he said to someone that works for him, give the kid whatever he wants, but he can't quit yet. And I was 24-year-old. I happened to be important to a guy that needed $1 billion. I didn't know I was important. I was just the right place at the right time. So he tells a guy that comes to me and says, okay, well, we'll give you a raise if you stay. I said, I don't want a raise. I want to be a professor. They said, well, what do you want? I said, rock star, astronaut. There's only one other thing I want. I want my own company. So I said, I'll stay if you finance I got millions of dollars of contracts. I got $250,000 up front. I got free office space for a couple of years. I got all the computer equipment, IT support. 10 people from DuPont came over to work for me. They didn't take any equity. So it's the best deal ever. And I did this one negotiation, my best negotiation of my life. I had zero money. In fact, when I started this company, I went to a bank and I got the only unsecured loan that you can get as a 23-year-old, which is, I said, I want to buy $5,000 of furniture. They gave me a $5,000 furniture loan. I was living in an apartment at $700 a month with milk crates for bookshelves. And I thought, $5,000, that'll last me 6 months. maybe that'll make it. So I got a $5,000 furniture loan. Then I said to DuPont, I need a $100,000 cash check up front to start. You can imagine these guys in suits, and they thought the kid is out of his mind. And they said, we can't give you that. You might take that money and run off to the Caribbean, like maybe where you are right now. And I was like, well, you got to give me the money because and this is my negotiating strategy. I said, you got to give me the money because I have no money. And they looked at me and they're like, you got a point there. You got no money. So they literally wrote me a $100,000 check. And by the way, Raul, at this point, on $700 a month rent, I literally believed that $100,000 would last me for 7 years. I calculated I had 7 years of capital, took the money, and I started MicroStrategy. And we were 10 people the first year. And I thought, I'm going to defer my PhD program. And when this thing fails, I'm going back to college. And the next year we were 20 people. The next year we were 40 people. The next year we were 80 people. The next year we were 300 people. And the next year people said, you got to go public. And at some point,
what year are we in? What year are we in now?
I graduated MIT 87. I started this in 89. Started MicroStrategy in 89.
Wow.
And again, I got so lucky. Lucky that I got misdiagnosed by that